Let's take a look at some charts on Monero for this week's article on Brave New Coin. So at the end of the day, Monero is really the only true privacy coin. It has privacy by default, whereas everything else on this list except for Grin does not have privacy by default. So it's not even really fair to compare all of these together. I just do so because they're often lumped together as quote-unquote privacy coins. Monero, for the most part, is leading the categories in which we have data for. Now you can't see Monero's daily transaction volume, you can't see total daily active addresses, so that right there should just tell you what you need to know about privacy coins and so-called privacy coins. Looking at Monero's hash rate and difficulty, they adjusted their algorithm from Crypto Night to Random X sometime in late 2019, November thereabouts. So even though it looks like hash rate's at an all-time high, you can't really compare it to the previous period. Nonetheless, we do have spikes here in hash rate, which could be botnet, could be cloud mining, could be a little bit of both. I think this one was some cloud mining activity. So we won't really know what this averages out to be, I think, for a couple more quarters, maybe a couple more years as far as when this settles down. But overall, since the algorithm switch, hash rate is up, it's steady, it's stable, it's increasing. All words you want to see used for a healthy network. You know, this stuff previously where it would rise up, they'd change the algorithm slightly, kick off a bunch of bots, and they'd do that over and over again. And they finally said enough's enough. We're just going to change it all together, make it difficult to use ASICs on at all. So most of this is advantageous for CPU miners now. Looking at the total hash rate distribution, it's a little troubling that two pools control 56% of the network. And at the end of the day, both these pools might be the same entity. I don't know enough about Mine XMR and Support XMR, but my guess is they might be controlled by the same person, people, entity, whatever. The higher the distribution of hash rate, the better for decentralization. That's just a no-brainer. I think last time I mentioned this, I was told that the new algorithm is harder to 51% attack than the old algorithm, Crypto Night versus the current Random X. It's just not a good look. Optics for this aren't good as far as two pools with 56% of the hash rate. So I'd like to see this spread out, obviously, as with any network. That's just not just Monero, that's anything. If we compare Monero to Bitcoin here, as far as total inflation and total supply, you can see Monero is in purple here. Total supply is around 17.8 million. Bitcoin's total supply around 18.5 million. Bitcoin has a final total supply, whereas Monero does not. Monero will always have a security budget, so to speak, in that there will always be a block reward in perpetuity. Monero's annual inflation is pretty much close to, if not equal to, Bitcoin's inflation here, just below 2%. I think the real difference between Monero and BTC is you can audit the BTC supply, you cannot audit the Monero supply, just by nature of being a default privacy coin. So there's always gives and takes for certain aspects of characteristics between all of these coins. Monero has ironclad privacy, which is so good that you can't actually audit the supply. So then you have issues where, do we have hidden inflation somewhere? Do we have different total supplies depending on who measures it? This isn't FUD, this is just fact, okay? We don't know, right? So that's an issue from now and forever. But at the same time, with Bitcoin, you can see all the transactions. You can look at anybody's transaction history dating back to the beginning of time for Bitcoin. And that, of course, has its own issues. If we look at transaction counts for Monero and the mean difficulty for the hash rate, I kind of compare these two because I can't really compare much of anything for Monero because you can't look at the on-chain stuff. But my general thought behind this is if we see spikes in difficulty, we typically see spikes in transaction count activity shortly thereafter. Some of this is mining related. Some of this is, again, potentially botnet related. Some of it is just like a bandwagon effect, more hash rate, more transactions, more miners moving stuff around. I think the biggest takeaway here is since November, again, the network hasn't died. Transactions are rising. It's, I think, at this point, safe to say that the switch over to RandomX was a success. And they've recently implemented new signature types that are even more efficient and cost less than previous signature types. So they're doing all the right stuff. They're hitting all the right notes. Continued upgrades for the network. Stuff you'd want to see if you're using Monero on a regular basis. If we look at transaction fees, for Monero have historically been the highest among all the quote-unquote privacy coins, mainly because if you look at block sizes, Monero has had the highest block sizes amongst all of the privacy coins. Now, some of this is packaging related in that if the way that these transactions are sent is different among the chains, you're going to have different block sizes. It's also related to just activity in general. If there's less real estate on the chain, the real estate itself is going to become more expensive and you're going to see fees rise. So it's a little bit of both. You know, Monero is super popular, transaction count's super high. So that means fees are going to adjust accordingly. Not always in a linear fashion, ideally not a linear fashion. But I do think that's part of why fees are as high as they are on Monero relative to the other coins, you know, which in general don't have ironclad privacy, don't really have any sort of privacy. So if you want a use privacy, the best that money can buy, you're going to be using Monero. And Google Trends for Monero, the word Monero, much like every cryptocurrency, is just kind of flat or has been flat for the past 2 years. Now some coins have spiked recently with price. You know, Link has spikes with price. Tezos, Doge had a spike a few months ago, but Monero hasn't seen any of that activity. And the biggest issue with Monero is, honestly, it's difficult to obtain. It's not really tradable in many places that are accessible to most people. So you have to be a trader or hobbyist, really, to access Monero. If Monero were more accessible, which I don't think is ever going to be the case because of the privacy is so good, there are regulatory concerns around it. But if that was the case, you know, if it was listed on Coinbase or someplace, then I think Monero would do much better price-wise than it even is currently. And if we switch over to technicals, we have 5200 EMA, VPVR, yearly pivots, RSI, Bitfinex long shorts, the usual suspects here. And I don't look at the USD chart on Monero, or the BTC chart for that matter, too often, but when I do, sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. And unlike BTC or ETH, Monero's just chilling at its multi-month highs here. No real retracements to speak of. It does have this multi-week bear trend, or bear divergence rather, where we're getting higher highs in price, lower highs in momentum, but it's still above the key EMAs. It's above a pretty big yearly pivot. It's above 3 digits. It's above the VPVR levels. So all these should act as support for any retracement. 125, 100, 85, those are all going to be big levels. Until it's below all those levels, this remains strongly bullish for me. The Bitfinex long shorts, I don't really think have too much relevance on what's going on here, so it's not really worth commenting on. There's just, you know, there's not much open interest relative to other coins, especially. And last thing I think I would say about this chart is trend has been bullish since June, and it's just doing what it should be doing. You know, it was bearish in 2018, 2019, did what it should have been doing then. It's doing the opposite now. So on the way up, you'd expect the next resistance levels to be the psychological levels, 150, 200, 250. The new yearly pivots in 2021 will help illuminate the key levels on the upside, I think, because all this is obviously super tight and isn't too helpful, you know, other than looking at just key horizontals, whatever this is here. It's basically there, 150, 145, you know, the previous local highs, local lows, that sort of thing. Looking at the cloud, similar to 5200 crosses, it has held above the cloud since April, so the expectation is bullish continuation. Not only that, but it's had a bullish TK cross recross twice now, and it's working on its third. So Monero, from a trend perspective, again, looks really good. It's doing things you'd expect it to be doing. If this essentially breaks for higher highs, you'd expect a bullish TK recross above the cloud, which will likely lead to 200, I'd imagine. You know, this is at its face some sort of inverted head and shoulders pattern, and we can argue about position and volume and all that other stuff. But when you're seeing a series of lows and an extreme low and a horizontal, like, this isn't perfect for anything, but if I have to pick a chart pattern or pick a sentiment bias that it's trying to paint for us here, it's going to be an inverted head and shoulders, which is going to be bullish, in this case, bullish continuation. So all of this together looks really good to me. As long as it can hold above 109, I think it has a really good shot at more continuation here. So you're either waiting for the TK recross to add to a long, you're waiting for higher highs to add to a long or to open a long, or you're just waiting out for this retrace to 109 and then the next Kumo breakout. But overall, this looks really good on a multi-month trend. Then lastly, the bear in the room, we look at Monero BTC on the 2-day. So it looks really good. It had this curvature. I always forget if this is convex or concave, but this is the kind of curvature you want to see. It's a W double bottom, it's an Adam and Eve, it's all sorts of stuff. And then it just dropped off the table completely, right? So this is where trend metrics aren't going to help you too much. When you're seeing this like 2-week 100% drop in all price gains from October 2019, that's tough for anything to sort of evaluate trend-wise. So I said in the article is, yeah, this is bearish. Yeah, it's below the 200, below the cloud. The next support level is going to be the local low. This just needs time. I mean, it looks oversold. It looks like it's going to drop off the table. It looks all sorts of stuff. But when it's this volatile, it's just hard to evaluate on trend. What you can say is on the upside, resistance is very clearly 01.01 BTC, but it's got to figure itself out again. I mean, this is just a jumbly mess, right? Like historically, that's been the case for Monero. It's been all over the place. So some of these BTC pairs are just, in my opinion, untradeable unless they're trending pretty heavily, which it was trending pretty heavily from 2018 to 2020. And right now it's back in this consolidation, distribution, accumulation, decision. So overall, Monero looks really good on the fundamentals. USD technicals look good. Transactions per day at an all-time high. Everything looks on the up and up for Monero, aside from the BTC pair.